Hey everybody. So this is going to be an interesting video because we got through the overview a while back, and then I did 2 takes of the introduction to this. So the first part was for context, just to kind of get an overview of what's going on. Then the introduction, that was the first part of this thesis that I divided into 2 parts. So now we're going to start the historical review, and I'm going to try to do let's see, Greek philosophy, the little introduction that I give to it, because I give an introduction, I try to give an introduction to each section, but yeah, so I'll try to do that, it's only a paragraph, but then Aristotle. So this is going to get technical, this is going to be a lot of fun. I might just have to stop it because this could literally, there's so much to say, there's so much in here. But yeah, let's unpack some things and let's see where we get. So, yeah. So this is I start the historical analysis on page 7, and we're starting right out with Greek philosophy. So this is the introduction to Greek philosophy. All right, so I'm talking so much, I run out of breath sometimes. So all Western cultures herald Greek philosophy as the cornerstone of conceptual ingenuity. That's a tongue twister. All right. Starting before the birth of Socrates and trickling down into Plato's academy, the origins of academic endeavors are said to have begun in the cultures of ancient Greece. In this respect, it's not surprising, then, that the root of almost every contemporary philosophical problem can be traced back to the height of Grecian prosperity. Such is the case with the origins of the ontological argument. While Greek philosophers themselves were not principled enough to engage in an argument that follows in the Anselmian fashion, they did lay down the systems of modality under which later generations would reap ontological significance. The quest to uncover the beginnings of modal notions can be traced through the progress of 3 schools in specific: the Peripatetics under the guidance of Aristotle, the Megarians under the influence of Diodorus Cronus, and the Stoics under the hand of Chrysippus the logician. So basically I'm talking about 3 Grecian schools, and I tell you which ones they are: Peripatetics, Megarians, Stoics, and then I give a guy from each one of them, a person who's famous in each one of them, and they relate to this. These are the people we want to talk about, okay? So Aristotle's for the Peripatetics, Diodorus for the Megarians, and Chrysippus for the Stoics. So first we'll talk about the Peripatetics, and who better to talk about than Aristotle, at least, given the context that we have with modal logic, and we're looking about ontology and being, oh my gosh, this is classic metaphysics that we're doing here, and we get to do it through the lens of the ontological argument. So this is just such a great venue to not only talk about God's existence, but to also talk about these just deep, fundamental questions in philosophy. So it's such a great segue, but yeah, I hope I can get through all of it because this section is kind of lengthy on Aristotle. I'm doing my best, so let's just see. So this is Aristotle, and I put in parentheses that his dates here are little c dot 384 to little c dot 322, and then I say BCE, before Common Era. That's not to, I'm just using that to be historical. I mean, I don't think that really, BC can also be before Christ. That's not why I'm, trying to do one thing or not do the other thing. So anyways, so let's just jump right into it, okay? So paragraph 1 under Aristotle. All right. So apart from any ties to the ontological argument, Aristotle, also known as the philosopher, is revered on his own as one of the greatest philosophical minds in human history. The association is unquestionably justified upon examination of his lofty critiques and weighty contributions to the process of thought. Perhaps the most candid demonstration of his wit can be seen with his collection of remarks on logic entitled The Organon. The Organon consists of roughly 6 different works and is commonly referenced as humanity's first recorded attempt at formal logic. It is through the pages of these works that modern logicians fashion their frameworks, and it is through this lens that many theologians constructed their conceptions of God. In a more specified study of modal logic, however, the pieces most pertinent in the organon are chapters 8 through 24 of Prior Analytics and chapter 9 of On Interpretation. So before diving into the trenchant study of Aristotelian modal methods, it's proper to discuss some of the history that surrounds the interpretation of Aristotelian texts in order to establish context for their discussion. So prior to the first half of the 20th century, most scholars who examined the logic of Aristotle were of one mind with regard to his formal outlook. However, in 1955, the peripatetic playing field was leveled by the Polish philosopher and logician Jan Łukasiewicz, who in his seminal work, Aristotle's Syllogistic, offered staunch criticisms of the so-called exegeses of earlier commentators. Łukasiewicz attacked Aristotle's interpreters on two grounds. The first was that the inferential schemas that had been offered of Aristotle's logic should be replaced with conditionals of propositions. This means that when assessing a formal proof, the conjunction of the premises should not be used to verify the truth of the conclusion, but that the subjunctive probability of the premises should, if true, entail the conclusion. Łukasiewicz even went so far as to declare that, quote, no syllogism is formulated by Aristotle primarily as an inference, but they are all implications having the conjunction of the premises as the antecedent and the conclusion as the consequent. So, footnote 8, I cite Łukasiewicz, Aristotle's Syllogistic from the standpoint of modern formal logic, second edition, 1957. Okay, so subsequently he gave the common example that the Aristotelian syllogism would be therefore the following implication, parentheses S, if all men are mortal and all Greeks are men, then all Greeks are mortal. And then I have footnote 9, I just say Ibid because it's the same source, obviously. All right, so clearly any student who takes the time to read the text knows that this is a gross misrepresentation of Aristotelian thought. In fact, in the years following his lectures, many commentators noted deep flaws with his interpretation of this part of the text. And then I put footnote 10 here. For a more thorough explanation of these flaws, see Korkanen, John, 1972, Completeness of an Ancient Logic. And that's in the Journal of Symbolic Logic, 37, volume 37, I think. And also see Timothy Smiley, 1994, Aristotle's Completeness Proof. And this is an Ancient Philosophy, 14, volume 14, it's a special issue. And I save page there. All right. So, yeah. So, just did footnote 10. So, however, while Łukasiewicz clearly erred on conditional interpretation, the remainder of his book was highly enlightening. For one, he concisely formalized Aristotle's categorical remarks, and then added new ways in which to frame the formulas. Moreover, his second criticism of earlier commentators played nicely into his formulation of Aristotle's modality. In addition to having facts about how a sentence actually is, sentences also have modes under which they could or would be true, should different circumstances obtain. So, Łukasiewicz noted that most scholars have avoided the subject of modal logic in the writings of the philosopher for a lack of basic modal logic accepted by Aristotle and all logicians. And then I say on footnote 11, I just say Łukasiewicz, Aristotle's Syllogistic. That's probably page 58. Let's see here. Yeah. So basically, they're saying that these people are having a hard time agreeing on like a standard for modal logic, and these other people and all logicians. But one second. Okay, here's where I am. So Łukasiewicz attempted to give such a system, which he entitled L. This thesis will not delve into the entire system, as it's not all relevant to the current discourse. However, a universal basis from which to work forward in modal talk is a point which has been harped on by many philosophers of logic. And then footnote 12 here, I say, most notably Martin, I believe his last name is pronounced Taxon, but it's spelled T-K-A-C-Z-Y-K. Marcin is his first name also, so M-A-R-C-I-N. And then I put the name of the article, which is A Debate on God, and then colon, Anselm Aquinas and Scotus. And this is in Ontological Proofs Today. And I think I put like 115 as the page number or something, or 113 as the page number or something like that. But yeah, so I talked about the Ontological Proofs Today, and yeah, so this is where I'm putting in the first kind of citation for that. And so yeah, harped on by many philosophers. Logic. Okay, so as such, a basic schema or minimum requirement will now be laid out for engaging in the metaphysics of modality, right? So we need some consensus on what are the basics of modal logic, so that when we do the metaphysics, when we ask the metaphysical questions, we're not grasping at straws or stuff like that, but that we're not just pulling things out of the air, that we kind of have a reference frame, not an Einsteinian reference frame. Okay. So I think I'm doing okay right now. Let's see how much. This is where it kind of gets a little bit formulaic or a little bit involved in everything, because I'm just trying to see like how many more pages until Diodorus Cronus here. And let's just keep reading and see. I'm gonna have to cut this off sooner. It might get cut off by itself. So, gosh, where is? I'm gonna go back to the table of contents and just see where Diodorus Cronus starts. So Diodorus Cronus, it looks like he starts on page 15. So then I'm going to, I think we can probably do that. So, and I'm going to check the camera time too. Okay, we're doing good. So, yeah, let's do this. Okay, so now we're going to start spelling out this basic, modal logic, giving the formal requirements and everything like that. More of a formality, but that's fine. All right, so first off, as with any form of logic, connectives are crucial. The following 5 connectives of classical logic shall be explicated first. Negation, disjunction, conjunction, implication, and equivalence. In addition, the modal operators are standard, possibility and necessity. At this point, it should be obvious that modal forms of logic are simply propositional logics with the additional 2 operators M and L. To make the operators of necessity and possibility primitive in the way that 5 connectives are primitive, it must be shown that they can be mutually interdefined. So necessarily A is logically equivalent to not, possibly not A, right? So yeah, hopefully that makes sense. And possibly A is logically equivalent to not necessarily not A. So not necessarily not A, all right. Also, the notion of inheritance plays well into the discourse of modality. So if capital A sub 1, A sub 2, ... capital A sub n entail B, so does necessarily A sub 1, comma, necessarily A sub 2, ... necessarily A sub n entail necessarily B, right? So we're just putting the necessity operator in front of everything. Okay, so lastly, the notion of interrelations via consequence and denied consequence are crucial to basic modal discourse. So the 3 consequence relations are as follows. If necessarily A, then possibly A. If necessarily A, then A. And if A, then possibly A. So the 3 relations of denied consequence are possibly A, and then does not entail necessarily A does not entail necessarily A, and possibly A does not entail A. So these are just like very, very basic truths, but we're like trying to get them out so that we can just kind of have like a non-debatable foundation for what we mean by modal notions. And these might sound like mind-numbingly boring, but like we do need this so that people aren't, just like pulling things out of the air, like I said earlier. Anyways, so yeah, let me just keep reading. From these principles, a basic modal syllogistic can be continued. It's important to remember that these principles can be assumed in every text from here forward. Normally, they are presented formally, but were placed in word format for conceptual accessibility. So that what I'm saying there is that I don't really want to just put a bunch of symbols up here without actually saying what they mean, because that's not going to help anybody. And this is where people are supposed to be understanding. So yeah, I don't want people getting lost there. So even though it is still kind of difficult, even me just reading it. So a formal presentation is given below. So then I just say connectives and I write not and then I do the disjunction and conjunction and implication and the equivalence with the two operators. I can probably write that, but whatever. And then I do modal operators. Possibility is obviously the diamond, and then necessity is the box. And then I use the turnstile for consequence, and I'm hacking the turnstile for denied consequence, which I know you can't see. And when I emailed Christopher Menzel about this, and he was like, yeah, you don't have to do that, just use a standard character set. But that's a notational thing, and he was trying to talk about the semantic notions of provability versus he was trying to talk about some other things, and he was talking about more of propositional logic, and it's not necessary. Like you can make those distinctions at a later time for like other reasons. You don't need to make those here. I'm just trying to be like as simple as possible without going into different differences between model theory and proof theory. We don't need to do that right now. But basically, so this is, let me just write it here as the turnstile, like that. So, and I'm saying that's consequence, and then I'm saying like boom, boom, and then let's see what I hack it this way. That's denied consequence, so it's not like an F without a thing. So that's the turnstile. Logical equivalence. There's a lot of different things you can write, but I'm just going to be using this here. And then I say, when we're talking about the mutual definability, I just say necessarily A, and then I do the little twiddle, is not possibly not A. So I could write some of these things out, like for example, I'll just write the first one out, and then you can like pull this up probably in like a PDF format or something like that, and just see what it looks like. So this is like the first thing here, and then it's necessarily A, and then we're gonna go is equivalent to not, possibly not A. And then I'm putting parentheses in here, but I don't have them in the text. Anyway, so these two things are equivalent. So since we know that A's are equivalent, we know that necessarily is like it's not possibly not A. So I could probably write this neater if I wasn't drawing with one hand, and hopefully this is big enough for everybody to see. But I'm on page 10 right now, so I'm going to have like, I guess, 5 more pages to read. Just hope I can do that. Putting this together with one hand is a little bit difficult. Anyways, so after I do the mutual definability statements that I just wrote up there in pink, I do the two. I'm not going to say it there. I'm just going to say inheritance shown above. So then I do the interrelations of consequence, and I'm doing denied consequence, and I'm just using the stuff formally. So I know if you can't see this, this is just a bunch of words, and it's like, good night, like why are you being so confusing? But yeah, my purpose right now is to just kind of get through some of the material, and then I can later like make these things a little bit more presentable, digestible, easier to understand. So in memento, because I'm going to erase this stuff. And I should probably also check the time just to make sure that I'm not going crazy long. Yeah, this is going to be interesting. Okay, so here's what I say next. I say, so after I've done kind of the formality here, I say, so now that a formal syllogistic of Aristotle's modal logic is underway, it'd be very possible to go through each argument and proof in his modal rhetoric, but this would only distract from more substantive metaphysical analyses. So basically this is saying now that we have the formal language and we can go through everything, we can go through all those arguments, we could formalize them, we could do a bunch of stuff, but that is just not necessary right now. It may never be necessary, right? Unless you want to read that. But for this, right now, it's definitely not necessary. So yeah. But this will only distract from more substantive metaphysical analyses. So that said, having an archetype for the genres that Aristotle used to divide up his logic is still important for understanding his methods. So Martin Taxon, I think is how you say his name, professor of philosophy at Ludwig Maximilian's University in Munich, comments on the significance of the division of Aristotelian logic as follows. He says that the assertoric syllogistic, which he's talking probably about, let me just let him speak for himself. The assertoric syllogistic, known as Aristotle's second logic, as opposed to his earlier, mostly rhetorical or semantical works, constituting the first one, turned out soon inefficient. So Aristotle's third logic came into being. That is modal logic that suits Aristotelian essentialism. 14, I cite Ibid. This is the Modal Logic Proofs Today, page 117. Okay, so essentialism was Aristotle's belief that everything in existence had an essence or set of properties which without it could not exist. In modern discourse, these properties have become known as essential properties. On the flip side, accidental properties, such as the color of one's hair, are properties which do not affect existence but instantiation. For example, Seamus can be instantiated with red hair, or he can be instantiated with blonde hair, but the essence of Seamus cannot be exemplified without humanity. To talk about properties that one could or would exist without, Aristotle needed a logic that would address the notions of possibility and necessity. The problem was that propositional and categorical logic contained no such operators. The operators in these lower logics only addressed what is the case, not what might be, must be, or will be the case. In this spirit, Aristotle's apodictic logic was born. The first notion that Aristotle spelled out in prior analytics was that of relations, and specifically relations among changing entities. The idea here was to complete a subject. Might seem like it's complicated, but the idea here was to complete a subject predicate analysis of relations. In this way, a predicate A could belong to a subject B in three mutually distinct ways. 1. A merely belongs to B, with merely in parentheses. 2. A necessarily belongs to B, without the parentheses or unnecessarily. And 3. A possibly belongs to B. So in footnote 15, I just say it's summarized from Aristotle's general work, and then I say in Ibid to reference that source that we've been pulling from, which is part of the organon and blah, 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 blah. But here's what I say. When I say A merely belongs to B, I'm just saying that we're not making reference to the possibility or necessity of A belonging to B. But in the next two, we obviously are. Okay, so here it's important to understand the meaning behind possibility and necessity used by Aristotle, because it differs slightly from the possibility and necessity commonly thought of today. So for Aristotle, in some sense, S was necessary if and only if it was true at all times, and possible if and only if it was true at some but not all times. In this way, he was employing a type of temporal modality that would come to further expression on interpretation. As discussed by Alexander Proust, this account of modality fails because we certainly mean more by saying that there are no square circles than just that there never have been, nor are, nor ever will be square circles. So the idea is that actual temporal existence has little to no effect on the possibility of temporal existence. Philosophizing cats, for example, never have nor will exist. Further, it's unlikely that they exist currently, but that says nothing about whether the nature of philosophizing cats can be possibly instantiated. Ultimately, Proust blasts the modality of Aristotle as comparable to that of David Lewis, but then he put, I'm quoting him here, but with time slices replacing universes. And then Ibid is the 17. So this provocative interpretation of the philosopher, while accurate, must be approached with caution. Aristotle's modal logic is clearly his most demanding logic, and misleads many who tread lightly and draw conclusions from a first glance. In fact, Richard Patterson, a leading scholar on Aristotelian modality at Emory College, has illuminated a dual interpretation of necessity used by Aristotle, in which there is a natural necessity on one hand and a conceptual necessity on the other. In natural necessity, A belongs to the nature of B. In conceptual necessity, A belongs to the concept of B. And then footnote 18, I just say Patterson, Richard, Aristotle's Modal Logic, Essence and Entailment in the Organon, Cambridge University Press, 1999, page 41 was probably where I was getting that quote. So, whether this notion can also apply to possibility is a bit of a gray area. Nevertheless, this dual notion of necessity is not enough to save Aristotelian definitions of the modals, because the notions of time are so finely ingrained into Aristotle's metaphysics that the same criticisms can be re-leveled against dual necessity. The other striking fact of the matter is that in Aristotle's definition of modalities, Aristotle does not give the definition of modalities. Variants, however, of an Aristotelian conception of modality have been written and defended extensively in contemporary circles. And then I will probably just finish reading this paragraph, and then I'll take a break and at some later time finish the rest of this, because this is quite a bit. So some accounts go for an essentialism that grounds modality in essences and takes necessity as primitive, and then I cite for footnote 19 Timothy O'Connor, Theism and Multiple Explanation, The Necessary Shape of Contingency, Wiley Blackwell, 2012. Okay, whatever. Not whatever, but I'm trying to get done. While others ground modality in the powers of causation and take possibility to be primitive. And then footnote 20 here, I say Proust, Leibnizian Cosmological Argument, and Blackwell Companion Natural Theology, page 31 is probably where that is. All right, regardless of whether he defined modality correctly, Aristotle's combination of essentialism with possibilia still has a hold on contemporary philosophy. Alrighty, so I'm going to stop there before my voice gives out, and yeah, thanks everybody, and have a great day. Bye.